does God influence the decisions that you make at the Capitol?
I would say that God influences my life. It influences all my decisions in my life. But more than anything, what I base my decisions on at the Capitol are the Constitution, our rights, those kinds of, are more of what I base my decisions on at the Capitol.
Are there any issues in particular? I mentioned earlier, you know, guns, pro-life, or abortion, that you turn to faith for your answer?
Again, you know, faith is important to me, very important to me. It's a big part of my life. But I also don't, this is somewhat odd for me because it's very private to me as well. I'd like to live my faith rather than talk about it. So again, I'm sure that comes into play because it shapes your whole life, right? And it certainly has shaped mine. But again, I look to the Constitution, really, for my decisions on everything that we talk about.
You sound, you know, when I've asked the question, do you feel as a public official that you have a duty to balance, you know, your religious beliefs, however private, with the Constitution and laws?
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking as you were asking that question that, you know, obviously, to me anyway, your faith gives you your moral balance, you know, knowing right from wrong, speaking the truth. That's where it obviously comes to play with me. I mean, I don't think, oh, and this may sound somewhat silly, but I don't think, oh, I shouldn't lie because if somebody finds out. I think I shouldn't lie because God doesn't want me to, and it's true. That's how I think of everything. Even though I don't normally say that, every decision that I make, I kind of judge it on how He would feel about it. So again, that's really more of where it comes in. You know, I don't want to be, you know, I want to be a truthful person. I want to be a good person. I want to do things for the right reasons. That all comes from my faith more than anything. It gives you that moral basis, I think.
When it comes to abortion and furthering that issue this session, what measures specifically were you hoping to see get passed?
Well, I know that there were some, I had a judicial bypass piece of legislation that, you know, we carried. I know they did get another one through the legislature. So, you know, here with abortion, it's more about life to me. And again, that's when I talked about earlier about the Constitution. I mean, obviously it plays a role, my faith, in that issue. Obviously it does. But more than anything, it's about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what I always say when I'm on the campaign trail, when I'm on the stump, and it's the truth. It's what I base it on. I do believe that there's a reason that life was put there first, that we have to protect life. We have to continue sorry, I'm losing my words there. There's a word I'm looking for that I can't quite, but you know, basically life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is what I base it on. You cannot pursue happiness, you cannot have liberty if you do not have life. And so because I feel that government's first role is to protect the rights of its citizens, that's what I feel like I should do when I'm in office, is to protect those rights, and life is the first right, and that's why I'm very protective of it. And again, while I'm sure my faith plays a part in that, it really and truly is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is where I come from on that.
The Supreme Court obviously has weighed in on the abortion issue. Just kind of playing the other side, would some say maybe that life and liberty kind of clash when it comes to you know, the liberty as a woman to do with her body what she will versus saving that life? Right.
You know, you cannot. They're two separate. They're two separate beings. There, you cannot say that gives you liberty by ending the life of an unborn child. So again, because it's my role to protect life, and if the person carrying that life is not willing to protect it, that is when government should step in and say, we have to protect this life. And so, you know, I've heard that argument over and over, but again, if you don't stand for those that cannot protect themselves, if you don't do that, then we've really lost the battle to protect life and the sanctity of it.
Were you in support of the fetal abnormality exception being removed?
I am not. I was talking to one of the representatives about that. I have to tell you, I'm not that familiar with the specifics of that bill. It was, I remember it was one time when I was down at the Capitol and we were rushing by each other and he stopped to tell me a little bit about it, but I have to tell you, I'm not that familiar with it. So I'd rather get the specifics before I get into that.
That's fine. In doing some of these interviews, talking to those in your chamber, some have mentioned, I mean, how would you characterize, and granted this was your first session, but did you feel like you heard God mentioned a lot in the different debates?
Yeah, I guess I did. I guess he was mentioned in the debates, particularly the pastor protection bill, obviously. That was talked about a lot. That was probably the one where it was most heard. But I'm going to tell you, there is a lot of senators and representatives down there that very, very, very much have, you know, live a life of faith. And it's so I hear it a lot just, you know, in talking. There's a lot of prayer groups down there. There's, you know, there's a lot of, you know, camaraderie in that sense. People want you to come together and pray or come together and have Bible study and that kind of thing. So it's really more on a casual basis like that than in the debates. Although, like I said, obviously the pastor protection bill, you heard about it a lot, obviously.
We did hear it a lot too. I think Birdwell and some in the House
Yes.
as well talked about God-given right.
Correct.
To bear arms.
Correct.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. Yes, I truly believe that our forefathers, that there was a hand on them when they created all of that they did in our founding documents, and so yes, I believed every word that he said, and I was just sitting there in awe listening the whole time. As a matter of fact, I tweeted it. I think I Facebooked it and said, if you're not listening, you need to listen right now on the live stream, because it was beautiful, and he expressed it so eloquently and far better than I ever could, but it's exactly what I believe, yes.
We also heard it mentioned with Patrick's, Lieutenant Governor Patrick's advisory council in reference to Abbott's PreK plan.
Right.
How do you think God and religion influence or should influence education? I mean, do you see PreK as a godless environment? Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't have chosen those words, obviously. I was against it. I was against the PreK bill. You know, I look at it from a mom's perspective, and that's what I told everybody down there. I said, listen, I'm looking at this as from the perspective of being a mom. And while I get that things are different for all moms, for different areas and that kind of thing, I see these as 4-year-old babies. I just don't believe that the state should be advancing this for babies. What I see is babies. Plus, as a mom, I'm very much I'm not in favor of what am I trying to say? Very strict environments. In other words, the home to me is the best place. And I get that not everybody can do that, and I'm not making any kind of accusations or insinuations about that. I just do know that this PreK was about, learning. If they don't learn when they're this age, they can't learn when they're older, kind of a thing. That was a lot of what was swirling around about that. And that's just not the case. It's just not the case. You can show me every study on earth and I'll tell you, listen, I'm a mom, and that's, what kids that age need to be doing is, playing in the backyard with a stick and letting their mind be creative. That's what leads to learning, not a structured, that's the word I was looking for earlier, not a structured environment where grown-ups are telling them what they can and cannot do. I fundamentally disagree with it. later in life or later in their school career, they'll learn about sex education. That came up in the House on the debating of the abstinence funding. Are you for abstinence only?
I am for. I think that's something that they need to learn from their parents. The children need to learn from their parents. And again, I get that they don't. I get that it's not a perfect world, you know, and that not every parent teaches their children that. But that's what I believe. I don't believe that the state should be focused on one or the other. I don't think it's the state's business to be teaching that to children. You know, I've said this in the past. I don't know that I've ever said it on the campaign trail, but I've said it in the past. It's kind of strange because I'm a old-fashioned, and I didn't realize it, reading, writing, and arithmetic. You know, I think if we focused more on that than we do in all these other areas that I don't really think is doing them justice, I think we'd be better off, actually. You know, let the parents teach them all these others. I mean, everybody's got different morals, different times that they want their children to know it or what they want them to know. I mean, why does the state get involved in that? So that's my view on that.
Another constitutional issue, of course, at the forefront is the same-sex marriage ruling.
Right.
What camp are you in, if you will, when it comes to viewing marriage, and is that viewed through the prism of your faith? Yeah,
you know, I didn't get into politics on that issue. My issue is predominantly, you know, fiscal issues, keeping government in its constitutional size box, focusing on the things that government should be focused on, like infrastructure, you know, protecting citizens, education, those kinds of things. So I didn't really come into it on social issues such as that. I will tell you that I was very disappointed with the Supreme Court ruling, very disappointed. And where my disappointment comes in, and I've said it to everybody and I put out a statement right away, is that from my perspective, I obviously agreed with the minority than the majority in the Supreme Court ruling, because I fundamentally believe that that is a state decision to make, not a decision to be made by the federal government. But that's very much me too. That's the one thing that I said on the campaign trail all the time. You know, it was my the health care, what Obamacare. I'm against that. I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all federal controlled health care program. I believe that the state needs to decide that, whatever we decide. So it's the same issue with the same-sex marriage. The fact of the matter is, like it or not, and I told this to everybody, like the decision or not, right now, the state of Texas has in our Constitution that a marriage is between one man and one woman, and it was voted on by the people of Texas. And so that's what I'm defending, right? That's what I am saying. This is what we voted on. Well, now the Supreme Court comes in and says, as a state, you don't have any right to say that. But I believe in the 10th Amendment. I mean, I am a huge 10th Amendment advocate, because that's where I think the decisions should be made, is at the state level. So that is my disagreement with that. We need to decide that as a state. What we need to have this conversation, this debate down at Austin, not the federal government, not the courts telling us what we can and cannot do.
So it's more of a states' rights, not...
Absolutely.
You know, a lot we hear, you know, based on the Bible, man and woman.
Yeah, no, I do believe it is a state's issue to decide.
Anything else to add that I didn't hit on from, you know, this past session when it comes to any of these hot button issues or just the presence of faith in government? I mean, what would you say to somebody outside looking in and they hear God invoked in these debates and they're thinking, separation of church and state, you know, that phrase.
Right. Yeah, but, you know, it's not, I think people misinterpret that phrase. It's saying, it's the opposite of what people kind of make it out. They kind of act like it's, you know, we can't talk about God, but it's just the other way around. What it's saying, to me, my interpretation is that it's to keep the state from saying you have to have this religion or that religion. It's keeping the state out of it rather than, you know, we all are free to speak about our faith and to speak about God, and you know, that's what it's trying to preserve, the separation of church and state, not just the opposite of which a lot of people say these days. So I think that's a great thing. I mean, religion is, you know, again, it gives it to me. It's what gives you what's right and wrong, and to love one another, and have the arguments, but still know that you can come back and talk to each other. I mean, to me, that's the best part of it, and I think that's what keeps everybody. It reminds everybody that we can have disagreements, we can have arguments, and yet we know that we are to love one another afterwards. And so I think it's a great thing. I think it's a fabulous thing, and I can't imagine what society or life would be like without that, foundation. But I will say that, you asked if there was anything else I'd like to add. It's just that it's absolutely amazing how many times I get messaged, or either texted or messaged on Facebook or Twitter or something, just out of the blue, somebody that'll just say, "I prayed for you today." And I cannot tell you how wonderful that feels. And I don't know that everybody that does that knows how much I appreciate it. And I will tell you, it is not a pretty world to be in a lot of time. And particularly for those who disagree with your political philosophy, they tend to make you out as somebody that you simply are not. Particularly, I just am doing what I think is right. Not because I have an agenda, not because I want to be mean to anybody. And so it's very hard to hear things about yourself that are simply not true. And so when you get that message from somebody, and it's very comforting, and there's nothing better than good people of faith that just, out of the blue will contact you because they felt the need that you needed it that day, and I did. And so that's something that was absolutely beautiful, and I will love, always love.
Senator, thank you.